First off, this paddle is not for everyone. The Boomstik is aggressive, loud, spins extraordinarily well, and is made with a Selkirk first all foam core, which is the gold standard for durability these days, and when compared side by side some of the other top power paddles in the market, it rises to the top of the heap for explosive pop levels. As of today, the Boomstik is available to players everywhere, in addition to Labs members, and the list price will be $333. While these may not be quite as good as immediate direct cash off the purchase price, there are two ways you can take a little off the top. Number one, if you leave a review within 60 days of this paddle's launch, you can claim a $33 rebate. And two, with the use of this channel's discount code for this paddle, INF-PBMED, you can receive a $40 Selkirk gift card from now through the indefinite future, which does give me a small kickback, enabling me to make future videos like this, and is very, very appreciated. It's also notable that through the testing and review process, Selkirk called a last-minute audible and extended the warranty on the Boomstik from 2 years, which would have already been one of the longest ones in the industry, to a lifetime warranty, and that specifically includes things like handle braking that other warranties often skirt around. I did put the durability of this paddle through a first-time drop series test and subsequent dissection, which I'll cover after the specs, and then get into playability. First off, Selkirk is simplifying the shapes in this lineup, which include one elongated and one wide body model. Both of the paddles in this series are 16mm thick, and both the elongated and the wide body models have long 5.8-inch handles that really give a perception of extended reach. The faces are made with 3 layers of carbon fiber and compact with Selkirk's Infinigrit, which basically is their secret surface sauce grit whatever formulation they say lasts 3 times as long as regular carbon fiber surfaces. I've been very skeptical of this, believe me, and I still haven't hit that 3x timeline with these paddles, whatever that might be, but I have been very impressed with how long the surface of these has held up, and through the course of my testing, I have absolutely noticed no difference in drop or spin whatsoever. I'll put the specs on screen here for you to pause and read as you like, with one thing I'll point out being the average to low swing weights relative to their high twist weights, which is near 7 for the elongated model and well over 7 for the wide body, and I would say that these accurately represent stable, consistent feeling paddles across the face. If you're wondering how they made this happen, well, that's an easy answer. See those shiny red things on the side they refer to as the MOI tuning system? These are basically 7.5 gram weights placed on the side to increase stability, pop, and power. Even though the lines on the side might make a person think that these are meant to slide, they're definitely not, and these are adhered very tightly and meant to stay exactly where they are. One concern I had about the MOI weighting was how well these would stay on over time, so I conducted a drop series test. You like the fancy name there? Where I basically dropped the paddle over and over onto the concrete floor of my shed, directly onto the MOI weighting system. After 10 or so direct hit drops, the MOI system was still solidly intact, but the edge guard started to loosen just a bit. After about 20 drops, the face developed a crease up the side, which looks to be over the inner and outer foam junctions in the core. At 30 drops, nothing changed from when I was at 20, so I started propelling the paddle down with a little more force. After about 7 or 8 of these launches, the edges of the carbon fiber face started cracking and the face had loosened even more from the edge guard, but the MOI system had not moved at all. So basically, the carbon fiber face is just as susceptible to abuse as any other paddle, as you might have expected, but the foam core and the MOI weighting seem incredibly resilient. Getting into the dissection now, it was actually quite hard to deliberately pull the MOI weighting system and all its components off, even with pliers and screwdrivers, but after successfully getting it off, I verified the weight of it all was just over the expected 15 grams, and I remeasured the swing weight, twist weight, and balance point with this weighting system off. I'll put these numbers on screen as well, but you can see how significantly those weights affect the specs of this paddle, as the removal of those weights dropped the swing weight of this elongated Boomstik down 10 points, the twist weight dropped over a point, and obviously the gross weight went down about 15.3 grams or 0.54 ounces. In terms of removing the face, it was adhered pretty tightly, and as much as I hate when this happens, I had to remove it in strips instead of in one whole piece. There wasn't any fiberglass, so the face layers felt pretty malleable, which I think was a good choice because this thing definitely does not need any more pop at the expense of increased stiffness that fiberglass would have added. You can now see what they call the boom core, which basically uses 3 foam types. One solid chunk of EPP foam in the middle that's pretty stiff, comparable in feel to the True Foam or Honolulu foam cores, an edge EVA foam around the paddle face perimeter that's more squishy, and then a typical orangish edge guard foam that runs down the paddle neck and down through the handle to provide strength. A key thing to recognize here is the notable space and movement between the inner and outer foam sections. This is particularly relevant because paddles that have this separation tend to play more broken in and loose out of the box, and usually don't have as much of a pronounced break-in period. One similarity I noticed between that of these and the Honolulu foam paddles or the 11624 power paddles was the use of that carbon fiber tape reinforcement along the edge guard. I've always pictured this as an add-on or a standalone strip, but after removing the face and looking closer at the Boomstik, those edge strips actually connect with an arc of carbon fiber that runs along the top of the paddle edge, lying directly above the EVA form portion, likely serving to reinforce the side and top edges of the paddle under the edge guard. It's also interesting to see that where those reinforcement strips cross the gaps between the inner and outer foam sections, the carbon fiber was more soft and pliable, still allowing the inner foam core to move independent of the foam edge. Looking at the handles now, they aren't fully molded in one piece, but they're about as close as it gets, and they feel very solid with a high quality insert and no palpable seams, and that's opposed to the handles of some other paddles like the wooden inserts that PaddleTech uses. You can also see that the handle gets its strength from the edge guard foam, and the weight was reduced by stopping the core foam at the handle and filling the middle of the handle with honeycomb. And though it looks all mushy and smashed, that's really not a big deal in the handle. The honeycomb had never really played a significant role in handle strength in any generation of paddle. I also cut out a piece of the foam core to measure density, and after dividing the measured mass by the rectangular foam volume, you can see that why, even at 16mm thick, the Boomstik has a much lighter feel than the denser 14mm core of the carbon True Foams, and is closest in density to the Honolulu foam core paddles, which are also relatively light 16mm all foam core paddles. And the V2 ripples would probably feel even lighter than both of these if their cores were just foam, but the added carbon fiber in their internal construction gives those paddles their added weight. Overall, I think the destructive testing and the dissection give us a few big main takeaways. The first is that the MOI weighting impacts the way this paddle feels and plays significantly. And then secondly, those MOI add-ons are very unlikely to come off. And thirdly, the multi-foam core, which is not only free of threat of core crushing, is built in a way to give max performance and feel out of the box with little break-in or breakdown. If I were to give a big picture view of what you should expect when using the Boomstik, I'd say this is the epitome of new age pickleball. It hits hard, spins really well, and really takes the incentive away from hitting third and even fifth shot drops because driving and speed ups have a high rate of success and a much lower risk profile than paddles with less pop and power. The first time I hit this paddle, I knew it was going to be a competitor for one of the most poppy paddles I've ever hit. For me, dinks and resets had to be dialed in quite a bit, but counters are as unreturnable as it gets. If the GX2 Power or the YOLO Pro 4 Perseus have more of a compressive, grab and launch type pop, these are the other kind. It comes off the face really quickly, and though I wouldn't say it's overly stiff, it is very crisp and the ball gives a notable crack sound when making contact. I found the sweet spots to be pretty good on both of these models, and the wide body in particular, it felt very stable and consistent feeling across the face. The measured swing weights weren't crazy low, but for each of their shapes, I actually found that they moved a lot faster and more maneuverable than you might expect. Even though I think these paddles are indeed more poppy and powerful than the PaddleTech TKOs, I think players with a comparable preference for those paddles would also like these ones, in that if you can control a high level of pop out of the gate, perhaps by contacting the ball at lower points or having a more fluid kinetic chain, you'll probably love these paddles and think they have one of the most versatile box of tools available. The response off the face is very consistent and predictable, but it's constant and predictably high, so for those who struggle with control, you may want to think twice before taking one of these on. Right alongside pop is a high drive speed, and while I think pop is probably number 1 overall for the Boomstik, drive speed power is still easily top 5 and could arguably be in the top 2 or 3, though it's a little more close in that regard. And lastly, like I mentioned before, spin is very, very strong on these paddles. Over the course of my testing, which is still admittedly early and by no means a long-term trial, I haven't noticed a drop-off in RPMs whatsoever, and I can shape the ball as good as any other paddle I've ever tested. The price point is high, but so far durability and performance seem just as high. So if you can afford the price tag and you want top tier pop, power, and predicted durability, these seem like a solid choice. And that's my take on the two new Selkirk Boomstik paddles, the elongated and wide body models. I hope the review was helpful. Let me know in the comments below what you think, and I'll catch you here for the next one.